Hi there. Thank you so much for joining us for the webinar. Today's webinar's title is AI, Accelerating Innovation in Asset Inspection with Optelos. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm April Beasley, the Marketing Director for Optelos. If you have any questions during the presentation, please click on the question bubble on the left-hand side, and we'll answer those directly within the next 24 hours. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. I'd like to introduce our presenters today. We have two executives from Optelos, David Tran, the co-founder and chief technology officer, and Neil Inman, VP of operations. Let's move on to our agenda page and we can discuss what we'll be showing in the webinar today. First, we'll be identifying problems that we're trying to solve in the utility space, how data management and AR are bridging that gap, how you as a utility company can begin with AI. We'll show you a small demo and then get right back to how we can help you get started. Let's talk a little bit about Optelos. Optelos provides unified data management, data visualization, workflow, and AI computer vision to accelerate asset inspections and deliver actionable business insights. We've listed out a couple partners and current customers that we're working with. As you can see, we have a lot of experience in the utility space. All right, well, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to our VP of Operations, Neil Inman.
Thanks, April. Okay, hi everybody. We'll just go through a quick few slides here and look at a little bit of the Optelos situation as well as the problems that you guys are seeing in the field today and how we can possibly help you. So really Optelos then, as we have a look at it, we operationalize your data through visual and non-visual means, really through 5 key steps. And the first here is obviously that ingestion of all the data. To us, it really doesn't matter what kind of data it is from whatever source and whatever spectrum that you want to apply into the system. And really, we provide you that with that single source of truth that you can put all that data into at any point in time. And then secondly, we transform all that data. So we find that there's so many different data sources and it's all unstructured. So what we do through our pay-to-date solution here is that we correlate all that unstructured data and we layer it into very usable insight from its raw base materials. Thirdly, then, we have a bunch of visualizers within the system that allows you to go through completely different types of data and formats. For example, imagery, videos, 2D orthomosaics, 3D mesh, point clouds, panoramas, then all your non-visual stuff and reports as well that you have. So Word, Excel, PowerPoint, PDF. All those capabilities are enabled you and your clients or whoever to visualize all that information from one platform in its entirety. Now, fourthly here, analyzing that data. So this is where we really add intelligence into that raw data that you've brought into the system. And it's all fully integrated with our AI system where we can label and train that data and we can deploy any AI and analyze that data to provide you then the 5th step, which is that operationalization of all that data so you can make meaningful insights, you can make a major difference to your ROI. And obviously push that back into any sort of system with our integration skills such as single sign-ons or back into an EAM system or trouble ticketing or whatever it is. So that's really in a very simple nutshell of the process of how we operationalize your data today. We've got plenty of experience globally, and we've honed our skills through a number of different customers that we've seen already right across the world. And we've seen pretty much everything in terms of distribution and transmission lines in terms of your assets. And we make that really slick and efficient for you to take advantage of. Now, as well as transmission and distribution, our skill sets actually transfer very nicely into a bunch of different assets and verticals that you can see here that may also be of an interest to you, which we can discuss after this webinar. So let's have a look at some of the challenges that you have in the field today. So here's my old boss, Lizzie's personal guard. As usual, those guys are lying down on the job. So anyway. So we're seeing a gradual move away from the traditional methods of inspections. So there's lots of new data and technology available to better assess the workflow, and digital transformation is seen as a fundamental shift in practices through different data types and AI. We see the workflow changing as the old men with experience and expertise and skill sets are starting to retire. So we're also seeing that as a driver to capitalize on the new methods and procedures. And of course, a culture of performing inspections with minimal risk is paramount for obvious reasons here. What direction do we want to go in? So we see lots of managerial goals to take advantage of this new technology and utilizing the data to better achieve ROI and results. So firstly here, we want to do more inspections, and we see that all the time. So utilities want to carry out as many as they can from multiple different data sources. So any system that you put this data into has to be completely agnostic. Secondly, each pass, we would want to carry out a greater number of checks from the available data. So rather than just perhaps looking at an insulator, perhaps we want to look at the conductors and different components on the line at the same time within the same pass as we go through to improve that quality. Now, thirdly, that better data that we've now collected, we can create better results because we've got actionable data to filter and find specific results for different shareholders so we can prioritize that repair that can be performed in the field. And then finally, so that we can achieve more insight over time, we can see degradation rates on different assets. So that time-based detection, we can carry out audits and search on relevant information as required. So what are the big stopping pieces that we see today? Well, traditional methods obviously are very slow. Clearly, we have plenty of humans in the loop still, so that's going to make sure that we've got plenty of mistakes. We always have lots of those where they miss certain items that they're looking to collect in the field. And it's obviously takes a huge amount of effort for the entire process here, from deployment of teams and cost, obviously, to then getting those answers back into the field. And we tend to see that's very reactive versus proactive outside the time-based solutions. And of course, there are so many point solutions to try and find that information, which is very difficult today. And that takes a lot of time, clearly, from the point of collection to the point of remediation. Now, in terms of data challenges, the systems tend to be point solutions with no integrated single source of truth. And that's one of the problems we're trying to solve here. So you cannot globally search across all your asset portfolio to label things, tag things, annotate them, and assess and deploy on those specific problems that you're looking to remediate. There are numerous data silos holding different formats and data types because there's no single source of truth again. That's one of the key problems that we have. And getting people access to all that data is very difficult to share and correlate it across the entire business. So what we want to do is prioritize the search by critical fixes down to less severity concerns from dynamic results according to company policy. And this is the problem that Optelos is designed to solve. And that's really where we start with that AI process. So I'll hand over to David now to run you through that AI workflow and all the pieces that are integrated in it. David.
Thanks, Neil. In this next section, we want to really kind of start with some background on AI, and more importantly, why data is vital to the AI process. So today, there's certainly a lot of hype around AI, right? We hear everything from AI learning how to play chess or watching a bunch of YouTube videos and identifying a cat. But really what is driving the majority of the economic value, the majority of the applications today, is what we call this concept of supervised learning. And really what that means is algorithms to solve what we call this A to B mapping. So what does that mean? So when we start with A, this is really what we call input data. And typically these could be images, other data sets, and oftentimes you need a lot of this data. And so this is really the raw imagery that you're collecting during the inspection process. And then there's what we call the B part. This is the output response, right? These are the label data sets. This is really kind of what you want the AI algorithms to recognize and identify. And then in between that is really the algorithms that make all that happen. today within the AI supervised learning process. And so collectively, when we talk about data throughout this presentation, we really talk about this A to B mapping, right? Getting the input raw data, providing some label output so that we can accurately and efficiently train the AI algorithms to solve these problems. Next, there's this concept of neural network. We hear this term a lot, and we really kind of want to really explain what that means. And so I've got a simple example here in terms of kind of what a neural network means in the context of AI. So here's an example. This is a price chart based on the price of energy and the demand, right? Pretty simple. The more demand, the higher the price. And we can actually create a simple neural network, and which is you got the demand as the input and you got the price as the output, and we can create a single node to map that relationship. And so that's really the starting point for what a neural network is. Of course, that's pretty simple. Let's kind of expand that a little bit. So let's say we have, in addition to demand, you got some time base, right? The time of the day impacts perhaps a supply. You may have some seasonality, weather, and things like that. And perhaps the source, right? Is it from natural gas, wind farms, things like that? And then how do you store that energy? And all that potentially could impact price. And so here's an example of really another version of a neural network that just happens to have multiple nodes. But really the concept here is you got what we call the A, we talk about the inputs, right? Demand, time, seasonality, and so on. And then we have the expected response, right? What is the price based on those inputs? The magic of AI is actually this part in the middle. Once you've developed the algorithm, the nice thing about the AI is it figures out all this middle stuff, right? It figures out the individual nodes, the intermittent relationships, and it allows you to automate that process once you set it up. So when we talk about neural network and neural nodes, that's really kind of what we're talking about, is this intermediate set of algorithms that identify and create these nodes. So let's talk a little bit about how that really impacts us as far as AI is concerned. So interestingly, about 8 years ago or so, when really the first generations, we call it the first generation of machine learning, started, what we saw was that as you provided the system more data, it really didn't improve the performance of the system. As you added more data, it's like it didn't know what to do with that additional data. So data wasn't as critical early on. Starting about 5 years ago, we, with the increase in compute resources, better algorithms, we start to see a really interesting trend that says as we start to build these more complex neural network, right, adding more nodes to the network, we actually start seeing improvements in the performance of the system. So the more data you've added, the more neural nodes we can create, we actually start seeing this increase in performance of the system. And so here's kind of where we're at today. What we're seeing is a exponential increase in performance. So the larger the size of the neural network, the larger the data set, the better the performance. So data now becomes a really critical element in the performance and value of AI. And so this is really a very interesting concept as relates to what we call AI computer vision. So for the objective of doing asset inspection, it's really about taking the input images, the A set, creating a massive neural network. Typically when we do develop AI algorithms, these take millions of nodes to create an accurate result set. And that's made possible today with that the evolution of those algorithms and the increase in performance. Secondly, and really what's really great about the AI community, especially around computer vision, is that a lot of these algorithms tend to be open source. They're continuing to evolve over time. They're continuing to get better over time. In fact, the latest challenges that happen every year, the AI computer algorithms, computer vision algorithms, are actually becoming even better than in human inspection. So the pace and the innovations around algorithms is making all this happen. And so what does that kind of mean to us, right? As we kind of look at how that impacts AI computer vision and AI-based inspections. So first and foremost, the neural networks that we just talked about are advancing at a very rapid pace. It continues to get better and better. And more importantly, it tends to be very open source. So it's easy to make use of these algorithms. Clearly, you need to have some expertise to also use these algorithms, but they really don't provide they're not really a limiting factor anymore. There's not really a competitive advantage of having these AI algorithms because actually they're hard to keep secret. They tend to be very public. And so what that means is data actually is becoming the scarce resource, right? This becomes your most valuable resource because obviously it's difficult to acquire a large amount of data. We said, in order to do AI effectively, you need kind of a huge data set, and it has to be labeled. So all this has to kind of happen in order to make AI perform to the level that we need to perform. So ultimately, the data and what you do with that data really becomes a scarce resource, right? That is your most valuable resource when it comes to properly implementing AI. So the next set of topics we'll talk about is actually how we do that. How do you make AI, make data, and how do you work for you, and how do you really start that process? And so we're going to introduce another concept, what we call the virtuous cycle of data and AI. And so what does that mean? So this is actually a pretty exciting concept within AI. And it's really very simple, right? If it relies on the notion of this cycle where you have a product, the product being a place where users can actually start to manage, store, and visualize all this asset inspection data. So you're starting to accumulate this data set within the product. That data starts to become curated. The users are labeling it, they're annotating it, they're using it to actually solve problems. So you're starting to really kind of generate a data set that we can then start to create AI models, right? It doesn't have to be very complicated at first. It could be simple as is something good or bad. But as this data and these AI models start to be consumed, the product is going to get better. And as the product gets better, you have more usage by the user. And then that generates more data. That's going to generate better models. And hence the cycle really starts. And so really this is kind of our goal, is to help you start this cycle, right? How do you start with the product? How do you make use of the data? And how you create models to really kind of start this flywheel motion going. So really it's what we call the artist start, right? It's really going from the data capture, being able to store it, analyze it, all the way to what we call automated AI-based inspection. And you really just don't start there. It really starts with, as we talked about, the data is the key, right? You have to have a platform that provides a single source of truth for data, as Neil mentioned, so that you're able to really leverage that information. The second is really the product usage, right? Making sure that the product really provides all of those capabilities that the inspectors and the stakeholders and the users really need. The ability to not only manage the data, but to visualize it, be able to collaborate, and really do all that in a single pane of glass. So you're really starting to accelerate the curve that we talked about, right? Going from managing the data to being able to visualize and create the models. And the third concept here, and what we really kind of work with customers a lot to start the process is, we don't need very complex models, right? You will get immediate benefit by answering simple questions. Is a conductor good or bad? Am I missing a component? And then once you start to accumulate that data, once you start to be able to create some base models, we can then build off of that so that we can add more checkpoints. We can add more automation to the process, but we don't need to start there. And so what we encourage our customers to do is really put these 3 steps in motion and really start to get the benefit of this virtuous cycle that we talked about. So the next part is how do you do that, right? That sounds great, but how do you actually make that make that into reality. And we're going to touch on that in this next part of the slide, and really kind of what we call operationalizing AI inspection. How do you start to create that process and implement that in your organization? And so here's really kind of the roadmap. It's elegantly simple. It really starts with, as we talked about, really having a single source of truth. You can't have these data silos. You need a way for users to be able to easily share, collaborate on that data. The second element of this is the ability to label, annotate, right? We said this A to B mapping, this data set, the value of that is really the labeling and the curating that data so that it can create better AI results. And so you need tools that allow customers to and users to label that data without actually having to move it around. Then the third element here is having an open AI platform, right? We talked about that the fact that algorithms are changing rapidly. There's a lot of great AI algorithms out there. So being able to leverage and use the best of breed solutions will be very important for a successful AI program. And the fourth element here is what we call zero code AI, right? You don't need to be a data scientist. You shouldn't have to rely on IT in order to implement and deploy your AI process throughout the organization. So these are really the four pillars that we'll kind of touch on next and spend a lot of time talking about each one of these. So let's talk about what we call democratizing data and AI. So really, what does that mean, right? How do we put that into a complete workflow? So really, it starts with being able to capture and manage data. As Neil stated, it has to be data agnostic. It doesn't matter if it comes from an aerial device like a drone or helicopter or airplane, fixed cameras, mobile devices. Being able to ingest all that information and having a single source of truth to manage that information is very important, because we said it's really all about the data. The better we can manage and organize that data, the better the next piece of the equation becomes, which is how do you visualize and label that information. What's happening today a lot of times is in order to label, users typically will make a copy of that data. They'll download it to a local machine. They'll use some tools to try to label it, and then it becomes very difficult to share and leverage that labeled data set, right? You're really kind of starting to create these data silos now. So instead of having to move that data in order to act on it, having a single source of truth, a single platform to be able to label that information and be able to share that is critical. The next step is, now that we have that labeled data set, let's start to build the classifiers, right? This is all the algorithms that you need. And there's a lot of great capabilities here. Optelos has the ability to do that within our platform, but we also believe in having an open platform, because there are a lot of great AI algorithms out there. So be able to use that and leverage across the entire industries, either through a single source, be able to outsource and use third party, or a mix of those capabilities, is really going to accelerate the AI process. The fourth step is, how do you deploy this, right? I've got a classifier, now what? A lot of times today, what happens is I have to rely on work from IT organization or data scientists to be able to take that and actually put that into my workflow, so that my users and stakeholders and subject matter experts can actually make use of these AI models. And that just adds friction to the process. So really eliminating that in terms of having zero code deployment, and then ultimately putting all that together into a workflow, so that you're starting to really kind of see the benefits of these AI infused data. And again, all this wraps around this cycle of data and AI that we just talked about. So for us, and when we talk about Optelos, this is really where we come in. We're really helping organizations start this virtuous cycle to help democratize and operationalize AI inspection, and really do that at scale, right? And so this is when we talk about some of the elements that we deliver with our platform. It really revolves around these four concepts: having the ability to manage and visualize that data on what we call a single pane of glass, having tools to effectively label and collaborate on that data without having to move it around. And then be able to train and create these models so that you're actually solving real issues, things like detecting bad components, looking for defects, looking for vegetation encroachment, lots of different applications that now we can start to apply AI to do that analysis, and then really be able to operationalize this whole process. And that's really kind of where we see a lot of the challenges today. Is there's just so many different point solutions, all these disparate elements that have to come together in order to actually make that AI useful in terms of solving real business problems. And so at Optelos, we really focus on delivering these four key concepts within our solution. Once you do that, you really start to realize many benefits from having what we call AI infused data. It starts with the ability to do continuous inspection. As Neil pointed out, the current process of manually having to look through every single photo just doesn't work, right? It's slow, it's error prone. So utilizing AI really allows you as a company to perform a lot more inspections, to do that at a more rapid pace, because it's automated now. We don't need human in the loop to process that information. The second benefit is we can start to really prioritize these defects, right? There's the ability to understand what will become service impacting, the ability to understand what my utilization is very important to my business objectives, to my performance, expenses, and operational efficiencies. And third, just giving me insight to that information, right? I could search on my assets. I can look to see how my assets has changed over time, and allows me to audit my assets in a way that I can't do if I have to look through every single data point. And so there's, these are really just three use cases out of many different possibilities once you kind of have that workflow and that platform in place. And so our next part, where actually Neil is going to provide a demo on how all this can come together. And as part of the demo, we're really going to touch on some of the key elements that we just talked about, having the ability to manage this data in a single place. As we mentioned, labeling is very critical to the quality of the AI that you get, right? So the better the label data sets, the more you can label, the better the AI will become. And Neil's going to demonstrate how easy that could be. And then ultimately, how do you train and start to deploy that AI across the organization? And so Neil's going to cover all this during the demo. And Neil, I'll pass it to you to handle the demo.
Okay, so as we transition into the Optelos Asset Advisor, and we have a look at the practical use cases of how you get started, and it really is simple. So we'll start off here. As we jump in, we can see the map view, which shows us our work packages and the locations really of all those work packages. As we jump into the list view here, we're just going to go through these different steps to give you a simple use case of how it works in the field. So the first thing we're going to do then is we're going to create a work package, which we've already done here. Now we like to create a work package for each class. So just so we're clear on this, an AI classifier, think of that as a brain, simple as that. And a class within that brain is essentially just a skill set, if you like, that you want the AI to carry out. So for this particular example, we've got two different folders here, one for damaged and one for healthy. Essentially, one for bad, one for good. So the first thing we're going to want to do then is just upload that data. So I'm just going to start off with the one of the data sets, the damaged, and all I'm going to do is just drag and drop some images into that area. And once the images are there, we'll start uploading them. We'll just use 100 for now, just to make it nice and simple. So I'll close that here. We can see the system, it's just going to upload all that data nice and quickly for us. Now, whilst it's doing this, what we'll also notice is that this is one of the easiest places to get started. Most people don't have a lot of data when they're uploading the data into the system, and they don't have classifiers and so on. So most people just use this to place all their visual data in one platform rather than having multiple platforms to use. And when that data is in here, then they use their traditional methods such as their inspectors to go through that data. And of course, as we're uploading here, we're also extracting all the metadata through our normal patented solution so that you can then view all that data and also obviously see it on a map. So once we've uploaded it and now we've managed the data, the next step we want to do is start creating what we call AI labeling. And it's a simple use case, really. I've already done some of this in this work package already. We can see here that we've got damaged components and healthy components. Now, the purpose of this is that we're providing that brain key information to those new skills. So what we do is we label each one of the images as we go through. Now we can do this directly from the platform here. And the system then will recognize that when we send it over to the AI engine for it to train those algorithms and create that classifier for us. So as we have a look at this image here straight away, we can all see there's a problem here. We're looking at this. Clearly there's, and there's also another problem here. There's also a missing lines. So what I'm going to do here is draw a bounding box around this particular object. Now it's important to be very accurate with your bounding boxes, but also labeling it as such. So we can see here I've drawn the asset of interest in here, and then I'm just going to label it as damaged in this case, and the system will automatically do that for me. Let's just have a look at the next one again. What have we got here? Looks like we've got some loose clamps as we have a look, so there's clearly some problems there. So I'll just highlight that again and put that bounding box around there. But this time I'm just going to choose next. So every time I go through one of these, I'm just going to go damaged because we've put them in the correct folder, and the system will automatically take me to the next image. Straight away here I can see there's a missing part in the bottom, so again we'll label that damaged, and so on and so forth. So it enables us to go through our data sets very, very quickly and produce usable data that we can then do that digital transformation and train that AI classifier up in our particular use case. So on this, we've got one classifier and we've got two classes. Classes are healthy and damaged in this case. So once we've done that labeling, then the next step is we're going to go into the AI manager here. First of all, I'm going to check all those images. There's a few that we've missed here, but don't worry, that's just for practical terms. But I could very quickly just check and go through those and highlight all those specifics to each one of those classes so I know I've got everything done within the system. Once I have got everything done, then step 3 here is how we train that data set. So what we're going to do is we're going to choose a particular account that we want to send this information to. Now, is it the Optelos brain trainer, or do you have your own that your company likes to use? It doesn't really matter to us. We can send that data wherever we need to. So we'll simply approve that data set, and then we'll start that training. And what will happen then, if it's our AI, we'll automatically package up those images and send them directly to the brain for immediate training. If it's yours, what we'll do is we'll package all this data up and then we can send it across to whichever AI is required, and you'll get that information as well. Now then, if we have more data as we're doing this, we may need to retrain it down the line as we want to. So we'll have a look at that as we go through. And then the final step here, going into step 4, is we have to deploy that trained AI algorithm. Now we can do that within our system by going into our AI marketplace. You can have as many AI classifiers as you want here. It does not matter how many you want. For whatever use case, you get the option to choose them from in our system. And then finally, once you've got those created, what we can do is then we're going to now validate that data and actually have a look and see how it works in the field. So I can pick tens of thousands of images at a time. I'm just going to pick 5 here just so we can have a look at this demonstration. And we'll get the brain to run through, the classifier to run through these images and tell me what's wrong with these particular use cases. And we'll have a look at that data in a second. So there we go, it's gone through them. Let's have a look at that data very quickly. So the first one is a damaged image. As we zoom in here, we can have a look. Yeah, we can see there's certainly something missing there on the clamp, so it's got that one right. This one looks healthy. Yeah, the clamps all look tight to me. There's no problems there. So the system, again, has been through all those and found exactly what's wrong on any of these as we go. Fourth one here, what we're looking at, damaged, yep, and that looks pretty loose to me. So again, it's identified that problem, either healthy or damaged. Now, this is really the first stage of it. So we've gone here for two very simple classes. But what you may find as you go through time here that you start capturing a lot more data, and it gives you the ability to then create a lot more different images and validations from rather than just two classes. You may have, I don't know, 6, 7, 10 classes, something like that. So in this case here, we'll just have a look at those images again and use a updated brain in this case. And we'll just do it on those 5 images. We'll make that call out and the system will go through them very quickly for us. And once it's gone through everything for us, we'll just quickly check those 5 to see what's happened. So this time it's having a look at the image, and it's one of the classes was misaligned clamps. We can see, yep, that looks misaligned to me. It's not tight and it's not on the wire correctly. Let's go to the second one. What have we got? Looks like a missing clamp on this one. Yep, we can see that. There's no screw there. It's not holding the bottom part of it in, so it's identified the second class on this one. The third one we can see here very quickly, yeah, this clamp is off the line completely, so that's clearly a problem, and so on. You can add as many classes as you want within reason of these AI classifiers, so we can find the information as required, and that works very nicely then for all your data as you go through time. So we can adjust this no matter what the use case is, no matter what asset you're trying to look at. We can just generate those classifiers for you to make that workflow very simple. Now, as well as getting these actionable results, we also may want to filter and search on any particular type. So we can do that again. We'll just close that down. And within the filter button here, we can jump into those tags and see all those different classes straight away. So if I wanted to look at all the misaligned ones, for example, I can click on that filter and then straight away jump into those images to view what the system has found for each one of those images that we've got. That's obviously on one single line. If I wanted to do that globally across all my assets, I can go into the search page. Again, I can go into those tags, pick those misaligned ones, and the system will go through every single one of my lines. In this case, there's only one, but if I had multiple lines on here, I can have a look at that and then view them straight away from the system according to specific type of issue. And just to capture that work from start to finish, what we have is 5 key steps. The first one is then upload and manage that data. You can do that traditionally using inspectors if you wanted to inspect that data. The second step is then to do that AI labeling. We showed you how to have a look at some of that information. The third step is send that out for training. Wherever you want to send it, it doesn't matter. Fourthly, you deploy those algorithms back into our system. And then fifthly, we allow you to operationalize that data by using our platform's presentation layers and mixing that in with our geolocation to then visualize and view all your problems, but also co-locate them with the actual asset in the field so you can complete that process. And again, if we wanted to go one step further from that, we could then put that into any sort of ticketing system that you want to push that data to, no matter what their different classifier types are. And via API, we can plug that in and have open statuses and tickets and so on for your own ticketing solution. Okay, and I'll pass that back to the team.
Thanks, Neil. That was great. Thank you for walking everyone through the process. Hopefully that touches all the key elements that we talked about. So we're going to finish here with really just a couple of slides on how Optelos is helping organizations start their digital journey. And realizing many benefits that come with being able to implement an effective and robust AI workflow within the organization. So these are the benefits that we see as we work with customers. The first one is cost savings, right? The ability to make the process much more efficient, be able to drive manual labor and steps out of the process through AI is really permeates through the entire workflow in terms of being able to dispatch technicians to the right location, having the right inventory and the right equipment when they're dispatched to remediate the issue. Second is what we call critical failure avoidance, being able to identify and prioritize failures that can potentially become service impacting, that could potentially be a safety hazard, and be able to get ahead of that and remediate those issues in a very effective manner, which really kind of leads to the the third benefit here is really the improvement in terms of safety and compliance, right? The more often we can do the inspection, the better we can recognize failure modes. That's really going to start the uh, uh, organizational cycle of having safety and compliance on a much, much more regular basis. Last but not least, it's really all this insight that we're able to provide over time, right? So instead of having just a point solution, having a view at one point in time, as we start to accumulate data, we start to infuse that with AI, we're able to correlate and provide a huge amount of insights to answer the questions you have today. And it's also be able to answer questions tomorrow with all this data. So why Optelos? We spent a lot of time kind of talking about the process and talking about some of the benefits, but in closing, Optelos is really one of the recognized leaders in asset inspection. We've got some very unique patented solutions that empowers you as an organization to really deliver digital transformation for asset inspection. So it first starts with the data, right? It's about the ability to manage and transform that information to achieve this AI workflow. And Optelos is one of the few vendors that actually has a patent around digital transformation of these data elements. The second is we really put you in control, right? Your program can scale as you need. You can utilize your own pilots, or onboard third party. You have control of the entire data process, and best of all, really being able to utilize the appropriate AI algorithms, having an open platform to really kind of automate your entire inspection process. So you really control every element of that, and we help you do that with our solution. And then, of course, be able to integrate that into existing business systems, right? Utilizing SAP, ticketing like ServiceNow, Microsoft, and be able to interface with those business intelligence platform to really drive a seamless workflow from data collection to analysis to trouble resolution. And then lastly, it's really being able to put all this together in what we call the operationalizing AI, seamlessly integrating AI and data and allowing that to provide you the benefits and solve those challenges that Neil talked about earlier in the presentation. So regardless of where you're at in your digital transformation journey, Optelos is really here to help you solve all those challenges and really implement a scalable process. So again, thank you everyone for joining us today. April, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you so much, David. And thank you everyone for joining us today. Again, we are here to accelerate your innovation in asset inspections. If you have any questions or if you're interested in seeing a demo, please feel free to email us at hello@optelos.com. Thank you so much. We're done.
Now what do I do? Should I stop sharing? Neil, are you good?